Hey guys, welcome to Module 6. We're almost to that finish line here. Almost through the class. So we're going to talk about APIs this week. Discuss APIs, consuming API. So what is an API? Application Programming Interface. That's the definition of it. So an API has been around for quite some time. It's actually become very popular. It's a way to... Sorry, drinking my coffee early in the morning. It's a way to transfer data from one point to another point. So early in the industry, software developers, we started using databases, and that's a good way to store information. But originally, early on, there would be direct connections to these databases, whether it was Microsoft SQL Server, if it was Oracle, it was MySQL, it was something that someone created that is some library of some sort. The thing is, it was a way to connect. But security world opened up, all kind of vulnerabilities happened, and then they're like, hey, we got to come up with a better way of doing this. We can't just keep opening ourselves up for potential failure, because we are in the process of finding ways to steal people's data. You look at, you start looking at consumer companies, Kmart situation that happened years ago, things that people are doing by hacking into Target or all these different companies' web applications and grabbing their data. So, and there's always going to be that one person who's going to figure out how to do this. So an API is a way to transfer data from one point to another point over HTTPS protocols. So over hypertext protocols. In this class, I'll teach you about the two different APIs. We'll talk about a RESTful API, which is more useful, which is more modern. And then we'll talk about the conventional XML methodology called a SOAP message. In this week's lesson in the lab, I believe it's 2, maybe 3 videos. I walk you through extensively. I teach you how to sign up for an API. We're going to use the New York Times as an API. They have a free API, and it'll allow us to grab articles and so forth. So the first videos we'll actually walk through, talk about how to do it, sign up an account, how to test it, how to research it. And then the second video, we'll actually write some code in JavaScript, and we'll actually do it. You guys will all get your own API keys. So it'll actually be a pretty cool, exciting thing. So I'm looking forward to showing you guys the lab, and I think it'll be very helpful because you'll be adding that to your project this week. So what is an API? It's very useful. It's a mechanism when two pieces of software exchange messages in a standard data format, like I mentioned. So API, you have your app, which is right here, and then you make a request, and then they provide you something. Did you know, let's talk about a very popular company, Uber. So did you know that Uber's app is all it's kind of interesting because their entire app is written off of APIs. So the app itself is, for example, when you go to the app, and I should pull it up here while I talk about it. So let me pull it up here. Uber app. So it'll make more sense. I'm trying to pull it up on my phone, but I can't show it to you without actually looking at it. All right, so we pull up the app. The app is using Google Maps. So how are they getting Google Maps? They're using an API. Awesome. They are using GPS. So they're using GPS that is a shared connection from your phone and their phone, because you have a connection. So they're utilizing that feature as well. So that's an API as well. Let's see what else. They are, let's Google this real quick. We originally started with Google Maps API, and then later switched to Mapbox because of confusion related to the pricing of Google Maps API. Now, I have another video. I talk about how to use Google Maps API. It has changed. The original video I was actually going to show you guys is I was going to show you how to connect to Google Maps API, but originally it was free. Now it costs money, and it's just, and once you have to enter a credit card in, you get some information. However, when Google simplified its Map API, Uber was once more happy and moved back. So there was a website I found before. So, and they had a list of all the different features that they were using. And this is a few years old. But nonetheless, Uber is using multiple APIs to develop their application. So it's not just like it's it's something that they developed. They developed the app on their own, but now if you look here, they have a API as well. Get a ride from users, learn more. I'm not sure what their API is and how it would help you if you were writing some code, but I'm sure there's some plan out there that let's see your solutions, what the solution would be. Events. Oh, I guess it could be something tied to your event specifically. Interesting. Nonetheless, pretty cool stuff. So let's go back to the video. So in that case, mapping. You're able to map to see where someone's at. You're able to see where they're going to get to certain locations. So they're making a lot of changes and so forth. All right, moving on. So you have two APIs. You have RESTful, which is pretty straightforward. Delete, post, put, and get. Those are the four common things that you'll use, features or commands. Make sure I'm still recording this. And then you have, sorry, I am recording it. You have soap. When I think of soap, I think of a piece of soap. It's an older way of doing things. It was very popular at one time. People still utilize it. But the thing is, more popular is RESTful. It's a little bit easier to use. Me and a coworker once wrote an API. We were consuming an API written in SOAP, and it had like two different layers to it. So it had layer 1, which was the API. It had layer 2, which was this thing called MQ. And so we were actually grabbing from the highest level, which was written in mainframe. So it was written in COBOL programming language, in which it didn't matter what language it was. We just needed to consume it. And he and I spent several weeks trying to consume it. We just could not get anywhere. And so we had someone from another group give us an observation, say, hey, try this keyword. And I was like, oh, that won't work. Well, after 3 or 4 weeks of trying, we finally made a communication point between the two pockets, beginning and end, and boom, it worked. And we were able to get some information, which was very helpful. So it just took a while, but we were able to do it. And the funny thing about it is, probably 2 weeks ago, that application that we wrote back in 2011 is still running. He's trying to get it decommissioned because there's a better way, which I agree, and I don't work anymore, but they're still utilizing that process. That's crazy. It was 2011, here it is 2019, they're still using that service that we wrote. All right. SOAP message. It's an ordinary XML document containing the following elements. So it stands for Simple Object Access Protocol. One thing is you get something called an envelope, which defines the start and end of a message. So it's like, you receive an envelope in the mail, and you have a top of the header and you have a bottom of the footer. You have the header, in this case, is optional attributes. It could be things that they're passing over. So let's say that we're using Uber again, and we're using their API. What type of information would they want to send over to us? Well, they would want to send us the coordinates of where the customer is located at. They would want to send us over what time did he or she initiate the transaction. They want to send us over that was payment confirmed. Stuff like that in order to proceed with that information. The body contains the data being sent. It's mandatory. So the body would be the data with inside that. And that data would be, in this case, mandatory would be coordinates. You definitely need coordinates of location or you're not going to find them. And then the fault contains errors that can occur in the processing. So the fault can be, let's say payment didn't work, or they lost communication with that person. Maybe there was a transaction starting and their phone shut off or something like that. So that itself could be a fault. So message structure, you have the data related logic, interactions with the database, select, insert, update, and delete. Those are, if you've taken a SQL class, those are features that you'll learn: how to select data, how to insert data, how to update data, and how to purge data. Communicates with the controller, and it can update the view depending on what type of framework. And so when we talk about controller and view, we're talking about probably model view controller. So we're talking about some type of design model from programming code. Example of a SOAP message. So if you look here, we have post. Post means writing a message. We have the application. We have the version, which is default. We have the envelope that we talked about. So the envelope shows the URL, which is common default, not something that you'll write in. It has the body, and in the body it has the data. You'll notice that the data is in XML format. So usually what they have is they'll have M : and then whatever the name of that header is. So in this case, it's get stock price. Let's say it was get coordinates. You would have get coordinates, and then maybe right here you would have M : address, and you would have a value. The value would have probably the longitude and latitude of where it's located at. And then maybe you would have, let's say that you had another message that tied to that. You would have the get stock price. And if you had multiple columns, multiple rows that define that. So in this case right here, we have stock name. But if we were going back to Uber and we had the coordinates, we might have below it, we might have something else. We might have, address as well. We might have destination, time, or whatever. You'll have all that information, and that's all in the body. So it looks a little bit different. So you have to decipher that data from XML. You have to parse it. So it makes it a little bit more challenging, but it's not super challenging, but it's just an older way of doing things. Then the SOAP response. So you have to get a response to know whether it was successful or not. In this case right here, the response is, hey, you know what? We got this. Here's the value, and we're able to capture that value. So this setup right here, the message, the response, like I said, it's an older way of doing things. You will still Google how to write a SOAP message or SOAP response. You'll see that it's still out there. It's just not popular anymore. People are using RESTful. I think personally, RESTful is a lot easier to use. All right, so what is RESTful? Representational state transfer. It relies on stateless client-server protocol, treats server objects as resources that can be created and destroyed. It allows JavaScript a lot easier versus if you were doing SOAP message. So I like that personally. It's pretty cool. So you have 4 HTTP methods. Pretty straightforward. Get, GET, retrieves data from resource. So in this week we'll use the get feature when we're getting information, because that's all we're looking to do. Post, submit data to be processed in a specified resource. So posting information, putting information, it updates a specified resource, and delete, it deletes a specified resource. Now, in this video, I don't go into post, put, and delete, but I do have another video on my YouTube channel that I could recommend to you. It's one of my Java tutorials. I teach people on the Java tutorial how to set up a RESTful connection, how to write their own code, pull from their database, and then do all these features. But in this one, we're only going to talk about the get, or do the get. So these constraints restrict the ways that server can process and respond to the client. So these requests so that they can operate within the constraint of the system itself, based off of the client architecture. Improves scalability, by simplifying server components and separating the user interface out. So stateless is cache survives restarts. The application is now stateless, so key to scaling, no state between requests. Session state is transferable. Response, you can now receive JSON responses, clear text, and that's what we'll use in our lab. Here's an example of a request. So as you see here, and we already know in JavaScript, that's our variable. And we're saying that, hey, we're going to use a XML HTTP request. And then we do an open, we use a get, and then this right here is our URL. This URL is simple. If we're actually using a get response, it would have some other information and maybe even our API key in there, and I'll walk you through how to do that. And we're saying true. Right here, we're doing a request onload equals function, and right here we'd actually have our code where we would pull the data and get that information, and which we'll actually do in our lab, how we create the function and get the data. Any questions? Well, obviously you don't have any questions, but we will go through how to do all this in the New York Times. So New York Times, say API, oops, developer. There we go. So once you watch the lab, I walk you through how to set up something. I already have an environment set up. I could probably sign in with my Point Park right now, see? And so we have an account set up for New York Times using APIs. And this will be information that you'll actually be able to go through. We actually, in the video, we'll go through the article information, we go through the movies, but there are some other things that we haven't did with it. You could view shared example calls. We'll go through what that is, how to do it. Just a lot of really cool stuff out here. Movie reviews, awesome stuff. So these are ways that we can use our data and present it in our stuff. And this is something that you'll actually work on for this week in your project. So you'll have to add a section to your website that is affiliated with the New York Times. So thanks for watching, guys, and enjoy this week. I think this week is going to be this was probably my most exciting week that I had writing some code. So enjoy. Have a good day.